Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Well, it's time for the health of Tipperary Slot, and this week Tipp FM news reporter Rachel Kellaghan interviewed Dr Victoria Veitch, who is a GP local to Clonmel. Now, she discussed pressures on practices in Tipperary and the ongoing issue of closed GP lists. And Dr Veitch highlighted the reasons behind this issue and what the future looks like for GPs if pressures aren't relieved, and some general advice indeed for people who cannot get on the lists.
Tipp FM investigates. Funded by the News Reporting Scheme. The health of Tipperary.
I can't count the amount of times someone has come into me with one issue and I've found something that could have altered their life. And unless someone's in front of me with that problem and I'm putting my hands and physically examining them, you don't find those issues.
That is Dr Victoria Veitch, who is a local GP in the Clonmel area, explaining the importance of GP consultations, something that many people are struggling to book as more GPs in Tipperary are closing their lists. The last available statistic, taken from a local survey, showed 54% of practices in Tipperary were already at full capacity. And there's no evidence that pressure has eased since. Dr Victoria Veitch, with over 10 years' experience working as a general practitioner in Tip, have you noticed added pressures on GP practices across Tipperary as we hear more about local GPs closing their lists?
Absolutely. There's an increased demand for GP consultations and it's only increasing further. Studies are showing it's expected to increase our consultations by about 30% in the next 15 years. And we would need an extra 1,200 GPs to meet that demand. I think it's mainly because our consultations have changed so much in terms of the care that we're delivering. People used to go to the GP when they were sick. Now it's not just about treating people when they're sick, it's about keeping them well. So the increase in consultations is leading to an increase in difficulty trying to get into a GP.
And for you personally, when did you notice this shift in your own practice in Clonmel?
I suppose even from when I started 7 years ago in general practice to now, it is very different. You used to have, in the summertime, there would be some slots that wouldn't be filled, whereas now there's never a slot that isn't filled. And that is a shift that I've definitely noticed over the last few years.
And why do you think that Tipperary in particular is so affected by these ongoing pressures?
I think Tipperary is a thriving county. We've got a big population and we also have a lot of people moving into Tipperary. We have more people who would need translation services or would need different assistance. Those consults take more time. So I suppose Tipperary, because it's dynamic and your population is increasing and the population is diversifying, it just means that there's more of a strain going on to the healthcare service here. And there is a huge expansion in the doctor's visit cards, then medical card patients, and there's been more programs. So all of that has led to more consultations and more complex consultations as well.
So is it a case of the more complex care you try and give, the more time it takes away from potential patients?
Absolutely. And people want time with their doctors and we want time with them. And the time pressures are really the sticking point. I know that there's a lot of people who want to get into a GP practice and can't get onto lists. And that's heartbreaking for us as GPs as well as for the people. But I suppose we want to make sure we're giving a certain standard of care to the people that are on our list, because you don't want a GP, you want a good GP. And really, a good GP is someone you can see when you need to be able to see them, that you build a relationship, what we call a cradle to grave relationship. You see them when they're a 2-week-old baby at their 2-week check, and at the end of somebody's life, that you're there to give compassionate care and help manage pain. There's only a certain amount of people you can, as one human being, deliver that care for. It's hard to take on more people without diluting the service that you're giving them.
You mentioned some figures earlier on about the ratio between GPs and their patients. Why are the ratios so off balance, and why are people across the county struggling to get on GP lists?
The last statistic we have on it is that there's about 1,200 people to each GP in Ireland. About 30% of GPs are going to be retired in between the last 5 years and the next 3 years, and 15% are considering emigrating because of the working conditions here. Really, it's nothing more than work-life balance. You want to be able to give the care you want to give with time to do it, and as well go home to your family and do all those things that we all want to do as people outside of our jobs. Other countries are doing it better, and we need to be as attractive to someone as other countries in terms of a work-life balance. Also, I suppose the GPs that are retiring are typically a different demographic than younger GPs coming in. So they tended to be mostly rural or single-handed GPs where they were the one GP in their practice and that was it, and they were there every day. That's less attractive to younger GPs now. You've got a legal obligation, if you have a medical card list, to provide 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week care to your patients. I think younger GPs, they don't want a single-handed practice, mainly because they can't get anyone to come and cover them.
Do you think this has a greater impact on rural parts of Tipperary?
It's for the reasons that I said, that rural area GPs tend to be one GP because it's a smaller population, but they can have a big catchment area. So we're finding a lot of GPs, they're retiring in these areas and they cannot get anyone to take their practice or take their list. It's a mammoth undertaking for a young GP to do. They don't have any experience maybe running a business or employing people. It is, I feel, the responsibility of the government to make it an attractive process, because otherwise we're ending up with medical deserts.
So what impact does this have on people in rural areas in the county, or people in general in Tipperary who can't get on a GP list?
It's awful imagining the person that is worried about something, that feels like they have nowhere to turn to. And that's someone who doesn't have a GP, who knows that maybe they don't need the emergency department yet, but that's where they're headed without getting somebody to help them. And what the worry is that people aren't getting that routine care that we're talking about, and that they're not in an emergency either able to access their own GP, or they have no GP to access, and so they end up in out-of-hours services or in the emergency department.
And what are some of the services that people without a GP can turn to?
CareDoc's one of the only out-of-hours services that will see someone who doesn't have a registered GP. Most out-of-hours services won't, which leaves them even more at a loss. And they're turning to things like online GP services. They're turning to out-of-hours if they can get to it, or they're turning to the emergency department because it is an emergency for them in that moment. And that's totally understandable, but as a county, need to be trying to prevent.
So with more people turning to services like the emergency department, is that having a direct impact on overcrowding in ER departments, especially as we hear more about the overcrowding in Tipperary University Hospital and hospitals serving Tip?
Definitely. There's countless studies, an entire Sláinte report that says that the more effective and the more well-financed your primary care or your GP service, the better they are resourced, the less people end up in hospital. And that is proven again and again with the numbers. So inevitably, the more strained the primary healthcare service is, the more strained your hospitals are going to be.
If pressures aren't relieved, what does the future look like for practices across the county?
A rather bleak outlook, to be honest. I mean, it looks like spending 12 hours at a desk, 6 of which is paperwork, and 6 is seeing patients, maybe. It looks at what some GPs are already doing, which is they'll only discuss one issue per consultation because they don't have the time to discuss more, or very short consultations of 5 minutes, which, if you're struggling with your mental health or if things at home are really bad, trying to open up to someone in 5 or 10 minutes is really difficult. So it looks like a less caring GP world, to be honest.
And that, of course, is not what we want to see in the future. And as of now, do you think there's enough support between the HSE and GPs and enough support from local representatives?
I don't see that support there. We have no IT system that talks to the hospital. So we would do a blood test on someone that could have been done last week in the hospital, but we don't have access to that result. And so we repeat the blood test. So definitely a lot of improvement could be done there in linking the services and in trying to set up your own practice. I don't see that support. I know so many of my colleagues that have contacted their local health office trying to set up a practice, trying to get a list. There seems like a lot of roadblocks.
So, in your opinion, what should be done to relieve pressures on GPs, emergency departments and health services across the county?
There is good work that's happening. This is not a problem that we've all just noticed, So the HSE has expanded GP training programs by 50%. So that's more GPs being trained each year. I think the important part of that is not just training more GPs, but retaining them in Ireland. And that's making it an attractive place to live and work. And also, personally, supporting young GPs at having their own practices is something that I don't see coming from the HSE, but would be really important. The reason being that there are large companies that are moving into Ireland that are buying up small GP practices and are putting in not a local GP or someone who lives in the community is going to stay there for 20, 30 years, but putting in like a salaried worker of a GP who doesn't know the patients, who'll be coming in for a week and then gone and a new person coming. And those companies are doing that to make money, not to serve their community. And I think it's more important to support young GPs to have their own practices who are going to get to know everybody, rather than letting that kind of a service come in, which I think would lose so much of the soul of general practice.
Yeah. Finally, just what would be your advice for people who can't get their names on local GP lists?
Yeah, it's so difficult. I wish I had a silver bullet for it. I suppose the general advice would be look outside of your immediate area because there are lists that are open. The second would be to make sure that you are highlighting to your local TD and etc. that you want to get on a list. Third, it will be seeing if you can qualify for a medical card or a doctor's visit card. Those cards have expanded a lot. The income threshold for them is much higher than it used to be. And you can offset things like your mortgage or your childcare. So a lot of people don't think they would qualify for a card, but do. The government has an obligation that if you have one of those cards, that they get you a GP. I suppose another thing to say is that you don't need to have a registered GP to access certain services. So the cervical screening program, if you don't have a GP, any GP that does smears has to do your smear, whether you're a patient of them or not.
That is all we have time for today. With demand continuing to rise and many practices already at capacity, access to GP care remains a significant challenge across the county. Dr Veitch has highlighted some progress that has been made, but I think it's clear that more supports are needed. Many thanks to Dr Victoria Veitch for joining us today, and thank you for tuning in. You have been listening to Tipp FM Investigates Health Podcast.
Tipp FM Investigates. Funded by the News Reporting Scheme. The Health of Tipperary.
And we will have that up there as a podcast. And that's Tipp FM News reporter Rachel Kellaghan there speaking to Dr Victoria Veitch in the very first of our Health of Tipperary slots. 1800 938 007. And Brendan was on, and Brendan says, I've tried to get my partner into a GP practice in Clonmel and I've been refused everywhere that I've emailed. He's 64, he had mini strokes and he has Lewy body dementia and is being left high and dry as his carer. I'm feeling totally alone and forgotten. My own health is suffering badly with all of the worry and the strain. I'm sure it is indeed, and my heart goes out to you, particularly when I hear that your partner has Lewy body dementia, because I'm familiar with that, and that is a tough journey that you're dealing with, Brendan. But thank you very much indeed for getting in touch with us today. We'll take a break. We're back with more in just a moment.
Tipp FM's Tipp today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.